Hello, it's me, and I've had a viewer request to go over this little guy over here. This is I think called a 4x4 cane ball, something like that. Anyway, it's a 4-layer puzzle, obviously. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I've gone through a lot of different 4-layer mods, but anytime I get a request, first thing I want to do is try the puzzle out and see if there's something maybe different about it, something unique. And I've always been very impressed at how most of the requests that I have do offer something unique in the particular puzzle that they have. So I thought I'd go through this one, not just as the request to solve the puzzle, but also to maybe go over some little bit more higher principles when it comes to solving 4-layer modifications, because that's what this is. So the question to ask yourself before starting is, because it's a 4-layer puzzle, an even layer puzzle, there's a variety of different types of parities that you might get. Now there's all the standard 4-layer parities that you're going to get when you have any type of 4-layer puzzle, whether it's a supercube or a modification, like this guy. Now understand, both of these puzzles have parity. A parity is just a characteristic of the puzzle. It's a feature of the puzzle. It's its state of being even or odd. Something becomes a parity problem if you take an even puzzle and reduce it to an odd puzzle, forgetting that you could have reduced it in a way that caused a normal even number swaps, but in a way that could not be solved. In other words, this follows the same law of cubes as these do, which means I can't do an odd number of swaps, I can only do even number of swaps. What that translates to here is I can't just have two edges that are out, but here I can potentially, because two edges out will effectively be like two swaps of two edge components. So although they both follow the same law of cubes, so to speak, you run the danger of taking an even layer puzzle, reducing it to an odd layer puzzle, and then trying to solve it as such when you might have caused a reduction that put it in a scrambled state that it could never be solved as. And that's because all it took was two swaps to put that out. Same thing with this. I can't rotate 1 by 90 degrees unless I rotate 2. Well, here I can rotate 2 by 90 degrees, so there you have it. When you have a situation where you have a parity problem, meaning a parity problem is something that arises out of trying to solve something as an odd layer cube, when you reduced it and started out as an even layer cube, even layer puzzle. So in order to get out of that, you have to go through your reduction. You have to break your reduction and do Red Bull algorithms or a variety of other URF algorithms, things like that, to break your reduction and then get it back again. And that's what, in essence, parity is. Well, so there's those usual parities that you get with this, but there's another kind of parity that you can potentially get with certain types of 4-layer mods, of which you have to ask yourself if this is one of them. And what that is when you're dealing with a supercube, and here's the archetypic example of a supercube right here. This is the supercube that most people maybe used first and foremost. That's where everything has a specific place to go. Over here, one center, this can be here, this can be here, it really doesn't matter. Edges have some meaning, but only insofar as parity. But here, everything does have a specific place and a specific orientation. So if I were to do a center rotation here, it really wouldn't matter. A 90 degree off over here will cause 90 degree off over here, or 180, you can't really tell. But here you can. Those center rotations mean something with supercubes because orientation means something. To turn this by 90 degrees, you tell that it was wrong, which means that you can tell this is off by 90 degrees, and you can tell that another one would also be off by 90 degrees. Because according to the law of cubes, you can't just rotate one center by 90 degrees. Something else has to be. Plus certain algorithms to get out of parity situations here, you can't use with this because those algorithms will cause rotation of the center that normally wouldn't matter here but would matter over here. So the concept that I'm introducing is in addition to 4-layer parities, you have to be careful about center rotation here. And you can potentially get a different kind of a parity with center rotation. One classic scenario is as you're putting in the last two centers, one of these two are flipped. So let's say everything is right except these two guys are flipped. Like this. So what I did here is I rotated these out. Is you get this interesting phenomenon where you have two corners that are out and two corners that are in. That's another impossible situation that you're not going to get in this, or well, potentially you can get this in this, but all you have to do is rotate this around. So when you're solving the cube, if you ever end up in this position, it means these two need to be swapped and something else needs to be rotated by 90 degrees. So as I'm doing this, as I'm reducing this, even before I put in the edges and reduce the edges. And even before I put in the corners, I know I don't even have to place the corners. I know that if I end up with this with everything else right, then I need to swap this and rotate something else by 90 degrees. What you do is you hold it in the position where the two that you want to swap are on the top, one in the back, one in the front, all on the right side, and you do the algorithm that brings this to here, and this to here. Once you bring this down, you then plop this up into this slot. So you do R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. Alright, now normally you do U to finish it up, but we're going to keep this over here. Then we do F, brings this into this slot over here, so that we're actually, we brought this down from here to bring it to here. So do it again. R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. And then do another U to bring it back. So now this is where it needs to be. Now I got to move this into here. So I do one more F, and over here I do a U. And then once I do that, this will be here, this will be here, and this will be here. Now notice in this bottom center, all I'm doing is I'm rotating it. These are fine. This is going to scooch over to here, so it's going to be white on white. And then this is going to come down here, so this blue will be here. And this will come over here and make it just fine. Turn, 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 turn. This is a little taste preview of what's ahead with this guy. But anyway, what this algorithm in essence did, and then we'll move this back over here. In essence, what this algorithm did is it rotated this by 90 degrees. As you can see, it's 90 degrees off. Instead of the green being over here, this got rotated like this, but we flip-flop these two. And at the end of the day, after doing that, everything should be fixed. Okay, so this is a situation where now all the corners are in and all of these are in. So that's how you would navigate around something like that. However, there is a certain type of four-layer modification that you might run into where you don't know. In what situation would you have where this might be rotated or might actually be completely in, and you'd still have rotational parity and not know about it? In other words, something is rotated 90 degrees, but you won't have this being out to signal that that's the case. Well, there's another way that you can cause a swapping without rotating this by 90 degrees, and that's if you look at something like this. So this is the megamorphinx. Now, what's different about these puzzles? Now, I'll also say that this one over here has the same characteristics as this. The difference is that in here, every center has a specific place to go. Here, not so much. You can see that this center has a white piece, so does this, and so does this. I could swap these guys and not even know it. If I swap these guys, then it's possible to cause a rotational parity where this is rotated by 90 degrees, these two are swapped, so because of that, everything will seem to be fine here, but something's going to be rotated. If, say, these two are swapped, we might not get a signal that this is rotated off by 90 degrees because these might not be swapped. Instead, these might be swapped. How would I know? If these two are swapped, this center will have been solved fine and this center will have been solved fine. So everything will seem to be fine, and yet at the very end, you're going to end up with a corner parity situation where the corners are out. Kind of like this. Okay, like this. So this was a situation where, let's say you're solving it down to the last side, like this. You've got the last side over here, and you end up with this very peculiar situation. All the centers are in, yet you appear to have parity of the corners. This is in, and these two are out. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because what appears to happen is that all these edges are in. You're not supposed to get these out. You're not supposed to have a parity with that. Well, this situation is exactly the same as this situation. This is a case of an actual parity, a parity of rotation. But it's also a case of false equivocation of two centers, and you're only going to get that when you have a four-layer mod that has multiple centers with the same color, and I have to recognize that. The only way to know that is to put the corners in. So the way to fix this is exactly the same thing. I'm just going to flip-flop these two, which will turn this by 90 degrees. Exactly the same thing. This is going to come here, this is going to come here, this is going to come here. So we have R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. Now I do a F, and I just do it again. brings this over here. Turn. Same strategy. Turn. 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 Any chance to use Trapham's puzzles I take. Now what I'm going to do is I need to flip-flop these guys around. So this will come here. Move this twice, and I'll bring this back. Turn. 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 Turn, and turn. Okay, so, and then this gets turned back over here. Effectively, I flip-flopped these two, and effectively, I rotated this. I rotated this down like that. So if I were to get this all back in place, okay, so taking a look at this, this is that situation that I was talking about. So everything is in, the corners like where they are, these just need to be swapped. This is completely different from the situation that I showed you here. Because in this situation, I had two that are swapped, and in a situation like this, where you don't have any equivalencies of any centers, a swapped center here without a rotation here will cause parity where the corners appear to be out until I'm able to turn this, because it's actually not the corners that are out. You have to turn this where it needs to be to see that this is actually rotated by 90 degrees. So if the corners appear to be out, just turn them where the corners make sense and see that this is actually 90 degrees. This situation would never happen here, because the fact that this is rotated, or the fact that these two are swapped, means that there must be a rotation of a center. Now the center doesn't have to be any of these, it could be just this one that needs to be rotated. So in this situation, nothing needs to be rotated. If this were out and these two corners are swapped, then I know that not only does this need to be swapped, but this whole center needs to be rotated by 90 degrees, or any of these center needs to be rotated by 90 degrees also. In this case, all that has to happen is these two need to swap. So just to reiterate, if in a situation like this puzzle or this puzzle, if you see any rotational, if you see any swapping over here and all these appear to be in, then basically it just means that this needs to swap and then just rotate one of these by 90 degrees, because another way to look at it is when this swaps, this also rotates. That's what that would mean. Otherwise it would come in just fine. If as you're solving it, this solves just fine and there's no swap, then you don't have to rotate any other centers. But if you have equivalency of centers, you might have a situation that either this needs to swap and this needs to rotate, or this just needs to swap and these need to swap. So what you need to do as you're putting in the last two centers is you need to put the corners in to figure that out. So in a situation like this, all I would do is I would swap this with an equivalent center. And I would do a 3 cycle so that it looks like a 2 cycle. So I would move this, or this, it really doesn't matter. So I'll go ahead and move the center up here. And I'm going to go ahead and do that algorithm twice, so that this will come here and then here, this will come here and then here, and this will come here and then here. So it will look like these two swapped, when in reality, this came to here and this came to here. So it's really a 3 cycle. So turn, 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 and turn. And this turns back over here with that same algorithm. Just like that. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is we're going to do it again. Actually, this will come over here, and now we're going to do that algorithm once more. This to come here, this to come here, this to come here. R U I U I L I U R I U I L. And at the end of the day, that's all it took. That's all it took to rotate that. So I hope you caught that, but basically my whole point with this is to ask ourselves, what kind of a puzzle is this? Does this puzzle more closely resemble this, and hence this? Or does it more closely resemble this? Because if it closely resembles this, then I'm just going to get the last two centers and not worry about it. If it should happen that two of them are flip-flopped, then all I'm going to do before I do any edge reduction is I'm going to flip-flop it back, understanding that it's going to cause a rotation over here and not really care. But if it's something like this, then I got to be careful because I won't know. If this is in or flip-flopped, I need to make sure that the corners make sense first. Because the question is, do I flip-flop it and allow center rotation, or do I not flip-flop it, I just exchange it? I flip-flop it by exchanging it. So what do you think? And I'll tell you that other puzzles that match this, you've got this guy over here, which matches that. You've got the tetrachus, which matches that. And you've got this big bow hunk over here, the dodecahedron, and that is going to more resemble this. Now those that resemble the megaminx is going to be the axis, because if you notice, you're going to have some equivalencies of centers here and here. This guy over here, which is the 4-layer hexagonal dipyramid, because these two are similar. And of course this guy over here, the Strasbourg's octahedron over here. And let's not forget the ghost, and let's not forget one of the archetypic original, the circle cube, which is solved just like a supercube. So what do you guys think? Taking all of these away for now, notice the resemblance here. This is really a similar kind of a thing, except you're shaving this down. I went through a tutorial on this one as well. So what do you think? Well, you can see that if this is a center here, these are all false sides. They're not real sides. This is the real side here because it is a 4-layer mod. But you can see that this center shares equivalency with this and this, which means it most closely resembles this guy over here, which means that we can have equivalency, or we can have parity, rotational parity of the center. And all that means is that once I get to the last two centers, before I decide where it's supposed to go, I'm going to put the corners in first. Because when I put the corners in first, it'll tell me if the configuration that I have is off by 90 degrees. If I see something is flipped, or even if it's not flipped, and I put this in, if this is off by 90 degrees, I'm going to have apparent parity of the corners. If it's not off by 90 degrees, then the corners are going to be fine. But if this is flipped, I just have to flip these two to flip it back. If it's flipped, but I do have parity of the corners, then flipping these two means I also have to flip this whole thing. So in one case, I flip it by causing rotation of another center. In the other case, where everything is fine, I flip this by doing basically a flip of these two.